Welcome to Before the Day Ends. Well, we're here, the second half of the second book of Matthew. So in the first half of this second book of Matthew, we really focused on Jesus' authority. So if you remember, Matthew in chapters 8 and 9 is really comparing Jesus to Moses when he led God's people out of Egypt. God had given Moses authority over Pharaoh, over the Egyptians, to set God's people free. And to do this, there were these 10 plagues or 10 miracles that Moses performs. Jesus, in chapters 8 and 9, has authority to set us free from our oppressor, sin. And to do this, we see 10 miracles that Jesus performs in the same kind of sections or series as we saw in Exodus. So there's 3 miracles, then a break, 3, then a break, 3, then a break, then 1. All centered around Jesus' authority. Now, in those sections, we saw Jesus having authority over boundaries, right? He doesn't just do miracles, he breaks boundaries. He has authority over nature, the supernatural, the authority to forgive sins. And then intermixed in these triads are sections about discipleship, about how his disciples are to do the same types of things that he is doing. And now, in the second half of Matthew book 2, in chapter 10, it's all about discipleship. It's going to take those themes and then apply them to his followers. So to connect these two sections, take a look at Matthew 9, beginning in verse 36. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them, because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. And then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, ask the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest." So, Jesus is sending out laborers into his harvest, his disciples. He's taking what he's done in 8 and 9 and then passing that on to his disciples. In fact, look at verse 1 of chapter 10. And then Jesus summoned his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits, to cast them out, to cure every disease and every sickness. So again, the very things Jesus has authority over in 8 and 9, he passes on to his disciples in chapter 10. That's what chapter 10 is. Remember, we had these little discipleship sections scattered throughout 8 and 9. This section is about the laborers going into the harvest and having the authority to do the work. So Jesus is speaking to his disciples. But not just the 12. I want to remind you that there are multiple audiences to Matthew. You have the 12 disciples, which were listed here. You have Matthew's community, who this is being written to in the earliest church. And then there's us. He's speaking to disciples, and that includes you and me. See, Christianity isn't a sit back and watch faith. We are to be involved. We are to go into the harvest field. We can't just sit back and let someone else do it. We can't just sit back and read about it. We get involved. We are to do the things Jesus did. Now, the rest of chapter 10 are instructions to that end. We have several things Jesus is going to say to us, to Matthew's community, to his disciples, about what it means to be a disciple. So let's take a look at this first section where he's going to kind of send them out, beginning in verse 5. These 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions. Go nowhere among the Gentiles, and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. As you go, proclaim the good news. The kingdom of heaven has come near, which we heard in the Lord's Prayer earlier, right? Your will be done, your kingdom come, your will be done. We see that here. Cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. You received without payment, give without payment. So notice that the very same things Jesus did in 8 and 9, right? Cure the lepers, raise the dead. Those things, he calls his disciples to do those same things. The 12, Matthew's community, us as well. We are to do the same things. He has given us authority to do those things as he did in 8 and 9. But I want to focus on, for now, this earlier section where he says, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He says, don't go to the Samaritans, don't go to the Gentiles. Go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, the Jewish community. Why would he do that? Because earlier we saw him cure a centurion who was a Gentile. In fact, even in Matthew, who were the first ones to show up to the birth of Jesus. Really, the Magi, right? They follow the star, and they are coming from the east. They leave when he is born, and they make this journey to see Jesus, maybe when he was 2 years old. But this long journey they make is the Gentiles. In Matthew 3, John the Baptist is talking to a group of people, and he says, do you think because you're children of Abraham you're special? He says, no. God can raise up from these stones children of Abraham. We saw in chapter 8, he heals the centurion. I just mentioned that. We're going to see in chapter 15, he's going to heal a woman who is a Gentile, or heal her daughter, rather. In chapter 24, we are going to see Jesus say to his disciples, before the end comes, this gospel will be preached to all the nations. And then in 28, he says, go therefore into all the nations. So throughout the gospel, from beginning to end, we see this mission to the Gentiles. So why would Jesus say here, only go to the Jewish community? And why in such a strange way, right? This phrase, go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Well, this phrase is repeated later. In Matthew 15, which I just mentioned, a woman's daughter is healed by Jesus. She's Gentile. And this exact same phrase is used. The lost sheep of the house of Israel. So what's going on? Well, remember that in the earliest church, this idea of bringing in the Gentiles was incredibly difficult for them. It was difficult for the disciples of Jesus. I mean, they were God's chosen people. Now God's including the Gentiles. That was very hard for them to accept. And so we see Matthew kind of rolling into this gospel, this idea, and we have this hint here in chapter 10 with this phrase, go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. This phrase repeated in chapter 15 because 15 will be a climax moment for the disciples to kind of get this point. So I want you to hold on to this as we go into chapter 15 later. And in fact, later in the New Testament, the book of Acts, Paul's letters, it's a lot about the struggles of the early church to deal with the Gentiles. The First Jerusalem Council was all about this issue. Paul's letters was about this issue of inclusion of the Gentiles. And so we see that mentioned here, and Matthew's going to kind of use this literarily to push us to chapter 15 and how he's going to, again, teach the disciples this very, very important issue. Okay. Let's skip down to verse 16. See, I am sending you out like sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents, as innocent as doves. Well, this section is about persecutions, that the disciples are going to be persecuted for the message that they're going to bring. And that's not unexpected. We saw this earlier in the Beatitudes, where Jesus is saying, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Well, we're going to be persecuted. Jesus was persecuted. But notice that he says, be wise. Now, don't be a doormat. Be wise about it, but also be innocent. So integrity is going to matter. It's going to matter a big deal. So be wise, but also be innocent. That we're going to come in times of persecution. Now, skip down to verse 23. Okay, it says here, when they persecute you in one town, flee to the next. For truly I tell you, you will not have gone throughout all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. So, when you're persecuted, move on to the next town, and because you're going to not go throughout everywhere before the Son of Man comes. What does this Son of Man mean, and when is he going to show up? Well, the Son of Man simply means human. It was used in Ezekiel in the Old Testament just to mean human. Later in Daniel chapter 7, we get this image of all these nations as these horrible, scary beasts in this chaotic environment before God. And this one, like the Son of Man, this one human compared to these beasts, shows up, and God gives this Son of Man authority over all the nations, over all the world, and it's kind of seen as the end of time. The end of the world, when God's kingdom comes, his reign is going to be on the earth, and this Son of Man is the one who's put in charge. So Jesus becomes this idea of the Son of Man. He's kind of attaching himself to this idea of the one who's going to bring true peace, who has true authority over everything. Everything is given to Jesus. So that's what this Son of Man is referring to. And we'll see this again throughout Matthew. So if you want to go back and read Daniel 7, that might be helpful to you. But when is the when? He says here that you have not gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes, which sounds like an end of the world kind of thing. Some suggest that's what he's talking about, that the gospel will not have finished going throughout everywhere before he comes back. Well, it's been 2,000 years. Well, some suggest then that maybe Matthew meant the fall of Jerusalem in 80, 70 to be specific. Maybe Matthew couldn't imagine a world where here comes Rome, they're on the march, and if Jerusalem's destroyed, that's got to be the end of the world. So some thought that might be the case. The truth is we don't know what he means here, except for this. A lot of times people get hung up on when is the end of the world. When's it going to be? Well, why does it matter? I mean, are you looking to repent at the last minute? Is that what you're after? Why does it matter when the end of the world is? Because here's the key. The end of the world is your end. It's my end. If you or I are dying of something, all of a sudden the end of the world doesn't matter. Our end matters. And that's true today. The end is our end. And we should live like that. So we live as disciples to get the message out before our end as well. To be involved and to be active and to concentrate on how we live today. Because today might be our end. So don't get all hung up, I think, in when the end of the world is. Focus on when our end is. Because also there's hope in that too. That we don't have to wait for the end of the world. We can live with these texts of this hope in God, even facing our end as well. Which leads me to this last section I want to talk about, which is fear. In verse 26, look at what it says here. So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered, and nothing secret that will not become known. So first off, he's saying, don't be afraid of other people. Don't be afraid of the world, because guess what? The truth is gonna come out. See, fear is a choice. We can live by fear or we can live by faith. In the end, God's gonna win. God's truth is gonna come out, so live like it. Live in hope. Live as a victor. Live in confidence that the truth is gonna come out. As long as you're living in the truth and you and I are living in faith and trusting in God, then we have nothing to be afraid of. Take a look at verse 28. Skip down a couple verses. It says, do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both the soul and body in Gehenna, or in hell, which was this garbage dump of Jesus' day. Gehenna was the valley of Ben Hinnom, this garbage dump where it is always burning, always kind of disgusting. He says, be afraid of the one who can kill the body and the soul. Don't be afraid of them. So don't live in fear. Today, there's a lot of fear going on in our world. It's a big topic of discussion. But the truth is, you answer to one person. I answer to one person. We don't answer to the world. We answer to God. So don't fear the world. Love the world. Be involved in the world. Don't fear the world. Fear only the one who knows the truth, who teaches us the truth, who gives us hope to live today. Because ultimately, Matthew 10 in our lives is about our ultimate allegiances. Verse 39, those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. It all comes down to this. How we live in the world is based on who we trust. We trust God, we respect God, and that's how we see and interact with the world. We don't interact with the world in fear. We don't fear the world. We fear and respect God. We trust God, who has truth. And we're to live like that. So in the world, yes, we're going to find trouble. So did Jesus. In the world, we're going to face persecution. So did Jesus. In the world, we'll be maligned, lied about, misunderstood, rejected. So was Jesus. But we know where truth really lies. We know where our hope really lies. We know where our faith is set upon. And that's the good news. We don't answer to the world. We answer to God, the one who knows how many hairs we have on our head and cares, the one who loves us, who gave his life for us so that we would not lose our life for eternity. Have a great week. We're glad you're here. We'll see you next time before the day ends.